Hi, I'm Jeff Monahan, and you are listening to the Movie Raid Show.
It's time for the Movie Raid. Tonight we're going to go behind Day of the Dead with actor Jeff Monahan, that is played as the Steel Hat taking zombie. I want to know, like, how were you approached with this role? Did you just hear about it, or was it like Dawn of the Dead, where they just invite a bunch of people and everyone heard about it, and then they just hop onto it, or did you have to do the usual?
I was just a young actor. I hadn't done too much, just a handful of plays, hadn't done any films, but I was sort of a go-getter about trying to get involved in things, and I heard that they were casting at George's office in downtown Pittsburgh, 247 Fort Pitt Boulevard. It was the known haunt of George, had been for a long time. So I just walked in. Off the street, and there was a woman named Barbara, who was one of the casting assistants or casting agents on it. And I said, I'd like to audition for the movie. And so she said, oh, okay. And she handed me script pages for the role of Steel. And I was just 20-something years old, just kind of a geeky kid. Hi, I'd like to. So all of a sudden I'm reading for Steel. And it was the part where he's threatening to cut Sarah in half with a machine gun, Laurie Cardill's part. I was just some skinny kid off the street. So I did this audition speech, and she said, great, you want to be a zombie? Like, okay. So I was like, and that was it. And I was first a zombie in the mine on the first day that I worked on the film, just sort of a background zombie. So I was down in the cave a fair distance from the compound where they were grabbing the zombies with the hooks, Mark Tierno and Deborah Gordon. And we were supposed to hurry up toward them to try to eat them. And I was hurrying as far as was proper for a zombie. My motivation was just to get closer to the camera. I was just trying to do my zombie walk and lurch up there and as quickly as possible. And for some reason, somebody liked me enough to do something and came up to me and said, hey, would you like to come back tomorrow and be a featured zombie? I was like, yeah, you bet. I went the next day to be a featured zombie. That's how that came about.
And did you ever had any other interactions with all the other extras and whatnot? There's quite a bit of extras and featured zombies in this. Did you ever interact with anyone, or like even share like how to do what? Did anyone actually had experience as well, or were they all pretty inexperienced as well?
There was mostly just inexperienced people, but fans. I mean, the zombies were by and large fans of Dawn of the Dead and Night of the Living Dead, as I was, and so it was just this incredible honor to come and be a small part of something like this. We only got paid $1 a day, and a hat. $1 and a hat, saying that said I sort of a painter's cap that said I was a zombie in Day of the Dead. But it was just basically people who knew of the films, who we knew instinctively how to walk and do our interpretation of whatever zombie type of thing that we wanted to do, and there really wasn't any reason to direct people in terms of that. It's like everybody was doing their own cool zombie stuff, so it was just fun working with a whole bunch of people. And even the actors, in the main roles, I mean, everybody was just sort of down to create the best spooky movie.
Who was actually involved as far as what kind of zombie you should have been? Did you have some form of input about that? What did you actually choose? What kind of concept, or they ever had something in mind, like any background or anything, like any kind of motivation to give you? Or is like, here, this is what you are, and then you just got to have to figure out the kind of motivation of your own.
Well, it was the most interesting thing for me because I was made up by Howard Berger, who went on to win an Oscar, I believe, for Narnia, and he was a really great guy. And it was Howard and someone else. It wasn't Tom. It could have been Greg Nicotero, I'm not certain, but it was Howard, and he had an assistant. And I went into the big makeup room on the second day, and the first day I was just painted blue, in a sense. On the wall in the big makeup room, there were a bunch of masks, so they were close to the camera. With mine, they were going to do a full makeup. Howard really wanted to do something special, and so he wanted to I was going to be shot in the head, and so he had a latex piece over my face, which covered the forehead and part of the covered the eyes, actually. Part of the cheek bullet hit was right in the middle of the forehead. And what they do is they attach a condom on the back of your head filled with blood, so they trigger that electronically, so the hole appears in the front of your head as the back of your head blows off. Which is very funny because Howard had the piece attached under the latex. He had the explosive charge attached already, and they were halfway done with the makeup. And he whispered to his assistant, he says, "Do you have the explosive facing the right direction?" And the assistant said, I think so. I'm pretty sure. And I'm laying there thinking, oh my God, if it goes off in the wrong direction, it's going to shoot me in the head. And then they laughed, and I realized they were just kidding with me the entire time. So they actually, did it properly. But as Howard got more and more into doing the makeup, he decided to make it like a drowning victim, and he sent the assistant outside to pick lichen and such out of the grass and things around the mine and bring it in and say, yeah, this looks great. Go out and get some more. So he just kept attaching more and more lichen, more and more moss. And so I became this swamp zombie. Chris Romero, George's wife at the time, came by, and she called me Broccoli Man. Now, you'll be known as Broccoli Man. Anytime I sign at any of these conventions, that's what I use, Broccoli Man, because that came from Chris Romero. But it was just Howard getting very, very creative and very into it. And then he said to me when we took photos and things afterwards, he and I together, and he said, "Man, this is my favorite makeup of the entire movie. I'll send you pictures when I get back to LA." And I thought, no, you won't. Why would you send some kid from Pittsburgh any pictures? Come on. But I thought. And a couple of weeks later, after the movie wrapped, I get an envelope in the mail, and I open it, and there's all these great photos. He made prints. He sent me a really nice letter saying that, again, that was his favorite makeup of the movie. And so it was just an honor to be made up by him, and it was just great that it was his favorite makeup. But it was just this incredible look, very, very unique look, which I love.
How long did you actually had to stick around there? Not just like for the makeup aspect of things. Like, did you actually had to wait or anything like that for a notification? Like, okay, we're going to need you on these days or whatever. Was there a long periods of time? Did you actually have to travel back and forth, or was it just like, kind of like on most part on your end?
Well, you said had to stick around. It wasn't a matter of having to. I was loving it, so I would stick around as long as they would have me. It was probably more like a 10 or 12 hour day, both days, especially the second day, because the makeup took a couple of hours. But I was just thrilled to be there as long as possible. There is one thing which I had totally forgotten about, and somebody reminded me of it sometime in the past year. There's a documentary about Day of the Dead, and I'm in it, which I had forgotten. In the documentary, it's like I'm sitting on a couch in full makeup between two girls who were working production, and we were just talking about the film and talking about the makeup and such like that. So I was down for being there as long as they would have me. And in fact, when I drove home with as much of the makeup still on me. It was just like, I just want to keep this on as long as possible. I'll shower when I get home. It was fine.
How was like the zombie scenes? Like when your time was coming up, like were you actually in a way roaming around with all the other zombies as too, or were you only in specifically that scene and then that was it?
I was only in that scene. Each of the zombie makeups, I was only in the one scene. And then with the one where Steele shoots me in the head, I was there actually around the corner. George himself is the one who shoves me through the doorway because I couldn't see where Gary Clark was standing when he's talking to Bub, doing his "Hey Bub" thing at the window. So George shoved me through. He grabbed me by the shoulders, took me by the shoulders, and he said, "Okay, I'll just get ready. When I want you to go, I'll just shove you through." And I said, "Okay, George," and through I went. And actually at that time it had been hours since the makeup was done, and when the makeup was first done, and you can see this on different photographs that were taken of me, you could see my eyes pretty well when they first finished the makeup. But by that time in the day when we were actually filming, the makeup, the latex had pulled away from the skin a little bit, which made the eyes seem really, really sunken in. My vision wasn't that great, but it looked really cool from the other side. So
Yeah, how was the actual zombie choreograph? Like, now you see in the scene, like they're all pretty well filed together and organized. But how did that directing process go? Was it like everyone has their mark? I mean, especially you couldn't even really see much, but did Tom Savini have a good majority of the directing, or Greg, or they all three of you kind of threw in their own part in that?
well, there'd be like zombie wranglers in a sense for the larger scenes when it was just a group of people and it was like, we need you to stand over here and we need you to walk forward at this point, and if somebody wanted to do something, yeah, go ahead and do that. For me, it was just those two scenes. And our direction the first time was just try to get up there and eat them. And the direction on the second time was George saying, I'm going to shove you through the doorway. So, and then I tried to actually even kind of elongate the scene for me, because after I'm shot and I drop out of frame, I had no idea what they were going to shoot next. And I thought, well, they might get a wide shot of the room. And so I was lying down on the floor, and there was a cabinet there, and I put my hand up through the handle of the cabinet and stuck a couple of fingers down through the handle as though I had fallen into the cabinet, and it kind of twisted my arm around kind of backwards. And they were like, "Oh man, that looks really cool. Get that." But it actually didn't end up in the film. They didn't use a wide shot in the film because obviously that moment was much more about Gary and Steele shooting himself. I was trying everything I can to milk it as much as possible, because it was great fun, and it was the first time I'd ever been shot in the head, so that was exciting. Because when you're squibbed, and I've been squibbed a number of times since, there's always that adrenaline rush, like, okay, they are going to press a button and something on your body is going to explode, and you have to, you're going to die. So hopefully not for real.
That is like a very small room for that fact. I mean, exactly, like, how far did you really have to go? Like, was it like pretty much an inch to you, or almost felt like a mile to you, because you couldn't really see much, but you had all these other zombies, like, literally not behind you, side of you, you got Steele in front of you, no less than not even a couple inches, and then now that you also have the camera crew, like, how was that process? Like, how was that even shot like that?
It was very, very tight, and of course the thing I was supposed to do was to grab the hat off his head, so of course the focus is like, okay, find his frickin' head and grab the hat off of it, so I got to grab the hat off his head. That was what I was told to do. That was the thing. It was pretty tight because, like you say, you did have the camera, the DP, everybody like smack in front of you, and the other folks around you, and being half blind because of the way the makeup was working beautifully, but my vision was somewhat limited, so you just kind of went with it. And the biggest challenge, I think, or the biggest thing that's on your mind when you do something like that is you got one shot at this, because they're going to blow a hole in your head, and if this doesn't work, or if you wander off camera somewhere, if you don't hit your mark, if you don't do it, are they going to re-rig you? Probably they may not, and it would take time and cost money and all that sort of thing. So you have to do it right the first time when you're dealing with a special effect like that. So it was something I was very thankful that we all pulled off together, and it worked.
Were there ever like any almost retakes of the gore effect? For example, originally the actor who plays Steele actually recommended. Yes, thank you. He actually suggested to George Romero, saying, hey, I need to talk to you about my death scene, and then, wanted to do the death scene of himself in his own way. And the gore effect, as far as shooting him and whatnot, like, was this, done maybe once or twice, or was this like pretty much a one take? Because a lot of this was on a tight budget, tight angling, just pretty much a quickie in a sense. Like even Joe Pilato's scene as well, he had to get it go. Like even the gore where all the blood's coming out, is like, oh, shoot it. So was that kind of in the same way, in the sense of, for you, were you just kind of waiting? I mean, what was the thought process for you, just like in that one tight spot second, like at a young age, like what was really in the thought process for you on that moment?
Just don't screw up. That was the big thing, because as weird as it sounds, it's so quick and it seems so simple, but like I say, you're going to be shoved through the doorway. Don't hit the doorway. Don't trip over your own feet. Keep seeing out of the makeup. They're going to shoot you in the head. What is that going to feel like? I didn't know because it's the first time I'd ever done it. How much reaction am I going to actually have to do on my own, or what? Where do I end up? Because I was told to just like stagger off to my left because I'll be out of the shot and all that sort of thing. So at that point, but the biggest thing with that is you don't want to be the reason that the shot doesn't work. But with the effects that George's team, and this goes from Savini to Howard, all those guys, they're so good, they're so professional, and the actors care about getting it right. They're not there just for the paycheck or anything. We want to make this work. So typically there aren't retakes because, like you say, it's a tight budget. Be a major reset to do it, and you could do obviously acting scenes. You could do several takes and things like that. But with a scene with an effect, you really want to get it in one take, which is why often they use multiple cameras and things like that. But as far as I remember, there was only one camera on us for this as well. And of course, those days they're shooting film, so it's not like now where you can have all the freedom of digital, so it's expensive when you're running film through the camera. So the idea of just getting it right the first time is so important.
Now, how much time did you actually spend in this costume? Now, before the scene, like you mentioned, like you already had these appliances on for quite a long time, but before this scene even occurred, like as far as like, you got to eat, you might have to go to the restroom or whatnot. Like, how was that? Like, did you have to leave that in the whole time? Like, especially the costume. I mean, how was the process of like having to stay in costume and having to go basically live in this for X amount of hours?
You just have to be very, very careful when you're like that, because I had lichen on my hands and the nails were done and all the rest of that sort of thing. So anything you do, you just have to be very careful not to mess that up. And if a piece of lichen would have fallen off, which I don't know if anything ever did, but it would be like you'd have to like judge. Well, geez, is that going to affect the look of me, or is that just that one little tiny quarter-inch piece of weed that's gone now? But like eating becomes an issue. I had teeth. I had false teeth in for it, but anything with makeup, even if you didn't have the false teeth, you have to eat certain foods and not eat other certain foods, and drink through a straw, and just be very, very careful. And as an actor since then, I mean, I always eat very gingerly on any film. I'll gorge like crazy afterwards, but I don't eat tons of food, which is always a little crazy with so much food typically being available on set, where you have craft services all day and amazing meals when they're served. But with makeup especially, you just have to be careful not to mess the makeup up, and so that's the first priority. At meal times and such like that. Yeah.
Was the temperature in that cave or any other parts of that area, did that affect you while you were wearing all that? Was it pretty comfortable, or was it just like, oh, I hope we just got to get this scene before I fry to death or something like that?
It was pretty chilly. It was I forget what the temperature was in the Wampum mine, but it's consistent. So it's like in the 50s. I think it's in the 50s in the middle of the summer. It's in the 50s in the middle of the winter. It's always like a particular, it only varies by a couple of degrees, but it was pretty chilly. But luckily I was dressed warmly enough, and I can't recall, they may have put long underwear on me underneath the suit. I can't recall, but that would have been a possibility. Pretty sure I didn't have knee pads or anything like that, since I wasn't supposed to fall, and that was my own anxiousness to say, I'll actually fall, and do that. But I don't remember being uncomfortable with cold in the mine, and the space that we were in when I was killed, that was a bit warmer. It wasn't out, in the heart of the mine itself, so that was a bit fine.
Now let's talk about the makeup. Being in this cave, and the actors and crew all had to deal with the soot that was going on in that mine, and they were coughing and sneezing, all that black stuff. Did it ever affect you and the other zombie actors, like as far as did the suit ever affect the actual makeup itself, or before or even during the filming?
No, I don't recall any issues with that. The place was pretty clean for mine, which sounds odd, but it was used to store like RVs and all that sort of thing. So within the structure itself, the mine, it was basically a place where people kept their off-season RVs and such like that. So it wasn't like you're going into working mine. I did another film years later where we were in a working mine, and it was a concern, and they had to make sure they braced up the ceiling of this other mine where we had shot this other film, Out of the Black it was called. But that was a real working mine, so we had real minor concerns with that, major minor concerns. With this one, it was basically a storage facility, so there was nothing mine-like that would have gotten to you except for the chill in the air. So, but that it wasn't too uncomfortable.
Now, how long was the actual process of the makeup? Now, there was a test makeup, obviously. Was there a difference between the two, like as far as what they were testing with? How long did that take, and how long did it take for the final actual process? And then did that have to be reapplied later, or was it just like, boom, here it is, it's on you, and now you have to leave it on until you're seen?
It was all at one time. The first day makeup was just like, hey, paint them blue, paint them gray type of look, which was very, very simple. The masks, like I said, was sort of the intermediate zombies who would be closer to camera and have the rubber masks on, which I didn't do any of those. And then the other one was just, hey, put this guy in a chair and make him up as something. And then it was just fortunate for me that Howard got inspired and went with it. But it was a one-time thing, so it isn't like, hey, we're going to test this makeup and see how it works, and let's tear that off and try something else. It was just a matter of, it's like you're sitting down as an artist, as a makeup artist. I guess, you're going to sit down and you're going to make a painting on this person. And with me, because of the latex, because of the appliance that had to be shot and such, there was a certain technical element to it because of that. And then he could have just colored me, with blue and green and whatever. But when he had the idea for lichen, and I don't know where he got the idea for the lichen, he may have seen it on the way in that morning. But when he sent the assistant out, like, let's try this, it just developed and took off. So it became very unique because of that. But there wasn't any sort of time to test or let's do a shoot and take a look at that on camera. No, it was like, hey, let's come up with something cool. And they were just flying with it. So the energy was great. The speed with which they worked was great. And there wasn't any waste. There wasn't any sort of, if this was a major studio production where you'd have to get certain things approved. And George stayed out of the makeup area in terms of any sort of input as far as it had to do with me, because he hired people that he trusted, and they were brilliant. So, and that's what he does. That's what he does with actors, and what I've done, other shows I've done with him, like Bruiser, years later. He just, hey man, that was great, man. Go. He lets you do your thing. He does his thing. He lets you do your thing, and it all kind of comes together. No micromanaging from him, and he's just it's always been said like he was just such a nice, big, cuddly teddy bear of a guy, and that's what he was. So him trusting the makeup people to do what they do really allowed them free reign with their creativity, which was great.
What kind of material, at least if you actually heard of it, or what kind of material was actually used to apply for your makeup? Now, this is the kind of makeup that didn't exactly come off that easy as well. I've seen some of the actors really you basically might as well get a shovel try to peel that off.
Yeah. Well, they use spirit gum, very sticky substance that they sort of paint on, and then they attach the latex to that, and then whatever sort of grease paint type of thing for parts of you that would be like, for example, my neck. There was no appliance on the neck since I wasn't shot in the neck. So they would just use different types of grease paint and shadowing. And again, going back to them being artists, they can make your neck look scrawny or whatever it is by the highlights and shadows with it, and using different colors. And of course, the freedom you have with zombies is you can add a big glob of blood, or attach some hunk of whatever, or build up a piece of latex or whatever to do that. So in a sense, I was made up in two ways. The one which under the latex, with the latex piece, actually making up the latex itself, and then the actual bare skin. And it is a little thing where you just have to kind of gently, and you can get help by anybody who is there on the makeup crew, just prying it slowly off. You don't want to rip it off and tear your skin or anything. But there's solvents that you can slip under the edges of the latex slowly, and kind of peel it back, work it off, and it just comes off. So it wasn't a big hassle or anything like that.
Now, did yours take the longest as far as process? Because it seems like your makeup could take at least at that time, 4 or 5 hours. At least that's what it looked like with the road trip, and compared to all the other zombies, or was it just purely focused on you? Was that individual for each zombie, or was everybody in the same room and everybody just basically was just worked on like in a rotational clock in a way?
There were different makeup artists working all in one large room. When Howard was doing me, as far as I know, he was doing no one but me. He was with me the entire time. Now, he may have walked away while something dried or something like that for a minute, but he came right back. So they did you zombie by zombie by zombie. It was sort of the zombie assembly line of that. But they had different people doing it, and I'm sure the experience of each of the makeup artists indicated what type of makeups that they were doing. And Howard was very experienced at the time, and certainly gained a lot more experience over the years, but he was extremely good, obviously, at the time. But so I was just I was his guy and he was my guy for the length of it. And it did take a couple hours, I guess, around that, but it wasn't a really prolonged, uncomfortable process in any way. I've done other things since then where they would take 4 or 5 hours to do something on you, but with this, for the amazing result that they got, it wasn't quick, but it wasn't uncomfortable. You weren't sitting there wondering if it's the following day yet or something like that. It was just a couple of hours, I would say, at most.
Now, how many pieces was actually added to this? Was it one big piece? Because it looked like there was like a multiple, like including the paints, including any kind of accessories to the makeup, the face especially. Like, was there multiple pieces? Or was it like just one big piece?
As far as I recall, it was just one large piece that covered the forehead entirely, came down over both eyes, and the part of the cheeks, just holding it on there like that. And of course, while they're doing it to me, I'm not like privy to everything they're doing. I'm not watching or questioning or anything that too much. There could have been something else going on, but I would say 95% certain it was just the one piece, and I took it off at the end of the day. It was just that it was all stuck together. And my hair, they just matted my hair down with green goop. You're all wet and it's cold and it's the gunk they're putting on you, but that's part of the fun. That's why you're doing it, because this is like it's like playing dress up on me in a cool monster movie. So it's like, if you're into that, and I certainly was, I was like, yeah, man, this is like, do what you will. It was just it was great.
And after the process was done and after the scenes were done and the film eventually wrapped up, was there ever a point where you got to actually have to view this, or did you have to wait till the movie actually just came out? Was there ever any special viewing for the zombies itself, or was it just like a hearty thank you? No. And anything like that?
It was just a thank you, and here's your hat, and here's your dollar bill, and that was it. And then I actually don't even remember seeing the movie for the first time. I was anxiously awaiting it for the time it takes, because it's obviously the rest of the shoot, but then there's the whole post-production process, which could take many, many months. But definitely was something I was waiting to see. But there wasn't a big screening or anything like that for the zombies. We were just fans who were thrilled to be there to do what we could, and so I had to wait for it like everybody else.
And when you did see this, or by the time you had a chance of this, like what the outcome as far as the popularity goes at that time, had either mixed or even negative. Like, what was your initial reaction for that? Like, you said yourself at that time, you were young. I mean, did you ever felt like you felt like you did your best shot, but you still stood by George on this, even though, or did you feel like, oh man, this is gonna, not do so well in my future career?
At that time, hadn't, other than a few plays, I hadn't done any other films. I was certainly thinking about it. It wasn't something that I was worried about would hurt me in any way, certainly, and it wasn't something that I thought would help either. It was just like that one individualized experience. I do remember when it came out, I think a lot of the negativity toward it could have, and this was my theory, which I remember, is that Night of the Living Dead, everybody knows what a farmhouse is. So you felt the claustrophobia. You know what a house is. You know how big that house is. And so if zombies are trying to get you, you know what your limited space is. In the mall, obviously, it's a much bigger space, but everybody's very familiar with the mall. So you know with your limited spaces, they're out there. With the mind, one of the concepts of just having a mind is that there are all these tunnels and random places and stuff. So it was a different type of setting because the claustrophobia was not in a known space that the average moviegoer would have recognized. So I think, in a sense, the claustrophobia, if people were expecting that in some way, they didn't get the claustrophobia because they weren't familiar with the space, as we were being in the space. But for the common, everyday guy watching the movie, wouldn't have been something they would be familiar with. But I also think that there was such a love of Dawn of the Dead that, like we were talking earlier, how things progress and advance, like onto the Land of the Dead, like it did, and all of that. There was a progression of story in Day of the Dead. So maybe people wanted Dawn of the Dead 2, which would have been very silly. And I don't think something that George would have responded to doing. He wanted to say, okay, what's the next step? What's the next chapter? So you had to go with that. And if you resisted it, then you would maybe not be a fan of the movie as much initially. But that's also why I think it grew. Because that initial reaction when expectations were not met in one way, on subsequent viewings, you can come to appreciate what really was done now that you can leave your expectations behind. This is still a really cool movie, and you can get into it for what George meant it to be.
And there you have it, everybody. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to this? Are there any cons or any other kind of events or even some projects that you also want to plug in right now?
Next project coming out on August 23rd, just very shortly, premiering at Fright Fest in London, England, is Pig Hill. Is directed by Kevin Lewis, who directed Nicolas Cage film Willy's Wonderland. It stars Rainey Qualley, who's Margaret Qualley's sister from The Substance, Rainey Qualley, Shane West from Nikita, Shiloh Fernandez from Evil Dead 2013, who's also now doing the new Christopher Nolan film Odyssey. But Pig Hill, written by Jared Burris, and that's one of those films that Marty Schiff was also a producer on from all of the George films. So that's coming out August 23rd at Fright Fest. Distribution following that at some point soon. So hopefully everybody can catch that. But George actually started so many things for me because I ended up doing half a dozen different projects with him, worked on some of his scripts subsequently later on as well. And so I'm just very eternally grateful for.
It's time for the movie raid, and tonight we go behind the screams with actor Joe Pilato, played in George Romero's Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead. Hello.
Behind the scream. I love it when people scream, especially after I shot them in the head. Dead. So what do we got happen now behind the scream?
Well, first of all, let's go a little bit of adventure in Dawn of the Dead, because you had what appears to be in the theatrical version of Dawn of the Dead, that you had a very, very tiny scene, but you actually had a role in the uncut version. The extended.
Anybody that wants to find it, you can find it. Dario Argento has, it's called The Black Box. Dario loves George's work so much. He has 3 different versions of Dawn of the Dead in something called The Black Box. And you can see my full full scene in its entirety. I was a little disappointed that I didn't make the American cut when it first came out, but thanks to the Italian, I say that because I am one, Dario Argento, you guys can get to see the full-blown scene behind the screen.
Yeah, and your character in that film, you're a cop. Due to circumstances of the zombie apocalypse, you became a looter.
I was kind of if I was a cop in St. Louis today, I probably would be on trial for something. Yeah, I definitely became a soldier of fortune. Turned in my badge and became a soldier of fortune.
So now we're fast forward back to Day of the Dead. So where was this located, and how long did you stay as far as filming?
It was shot in Wampum, PA, Elwood City, PA, very small towns in an underground mine that was used to, at one point in time during the Cold War, to store certain sensitive documents affecting the state of Pennsylvania, and then it became a place where people would store their recreational vehicles or boat for the winter. And 3-4 miles long, if you went off the beaten track and got lost, you'd be lucky if somebody found you. We'd show up for work every day, pitch black in the morning, and we'd enter the mine, and there'd be golf carts there 2 miles deep into the mine, where the pretty much the permanent set for the movie was. And it was cold. It was a witch's pit.
So everything was still there when you got there, including like the old military boxes, ammo boxes, and some vehicle parts and stuff?
No, but at that time, by that time, all that stuff had been either sent somewhere else or destroyed. I have no idea. Mostly it then became a storage facility for recreational vehicles.
What about the silo scene? Wasn't that part of that too, or was that separate?
That was an actual abandoned Nike base. I can't remember the exact city, but that was not part of the mine, although in the film it looks as though it is the top of the mine, and that's how the zombies got to come down that elevator. But that was an actual Nike base in and around Wampum, Elwood City. I don't know the exact, I can't remember the exact location, but there is a book coming out actually this week written by a guy named Lee Carr, which is day-by-day accounting of the entire shoot of Day of the Dead. I believe it's called Day of the Dead. I don't know if it has a subtitle or anything like that, but the gentleman's name is Lee Carr. Can't remember if it's C or K, but you can look that up because I saw him at a horror convention in Pittsburgh last week, and he told me actually 10 days ago, and he said that the book was due to come out this week. I guess check with Amazon or find out, and that'll give you a blow-by-blow, day-by-day chronology of the shooting, plus interviews and things like that.
Now, when it comes to your character, Captain Rhodes, how did you prepare for that? Because you got the lead role of what we knew later on in the film, that Captain Rhodes slowly becomes insane. Even though he becomes an asshole first, but then he's an insane asshole.
Well, first of all, every character in their own way, some more obvious than others, became insane. Most notably, Dr. Logan, Frankenstein, who called him, really was just going out of his mind. Sarah and, oh my God, I can't remember John Evans' character. I shot the guy in the head. That'll come to me. I'm sorry about that. You know, they were starting to see that Logan was going insane, and they were kind of figuring out how they were going to get out of that booby hatch. And then you had John, that the helicopter pilot's character's name? John?
Yeah, that's John, a.k.a. Flyboy.
Flyboy, yeah. He was going deeper and deeper into his voodoo analogy, Haitian analogy of life, in a sane way, but in many ways that whole speech in the in the Winnebago was kind of an homage, because in the 1920s and 30s, there were about 4 or 5 major zombie. I walked with a zombie, White Zombie. Bela Lugosi's in one of them. I can't remember the exact titles, but there was a very successful period of time for zombie movies, and that whole speech was kind of an homage to that. You had the radio operator, Jarlett's character, who was drinking as much booze as he could till it ran out. I just remembered John Appleton. He was Fisher. And Rhodes was insane to begin with. He kind of had the same insanity that Hitler had. It wasn't going to take much to light his fuse at all. Once Major Cooper died and he took over the show, you knew it was going to be a losing proposition.
Yeah, in terms of story, it's actually interesting because the fact that we know the name Major Cooper, but we don't have no real insight of who he was. He just was just a major that was killed in either by a zombie attack or other means.
It's never been made clear, but it will be made clear within the next 2 years, and that's all I'm going to say about that. That's kind of a behind-screen secret.
Like I said about Major Cooper, it's like we don't know exactly about him, but that's the interesting part of it. It's like you don't necessarily need to have full insight on every single character in this particular film.
Right. It obviously it was a government operation, and it was, I guess, a last chance shot at destroying whatever created this occurrence, which is another mystery in all the movies. It's even a mystery. I don't know if you're paying attention to Del Toro's. It'll come to me. Too many brain cells burnt. Your listeners will know what I'm talking about. Title will come to me probably, hopefully, in the next few minutes. But it also deals, it's called The Strain, Strain. And once again, these creatures appear, but no one has really addressed the why or how of it, And even if we go back to Night of the Living Dead, and that's, it's not answered in the first movie, and it's never been answered. And I'm not sure George wants it answered, I think the most telling clue was some of the PR they used on Dawn of the Dead, the famous phrase, when there's no more room in hell, the dead shall walk the earth. So maybe there's no more room in hell. I don't know. Nobody seems to know.
Who knows? It could be a natural thing. We don't know. But that's what's cool in this film of Day of the Dead is that you have a group of scientists and you have military that were originally there to aid the scientists, and you see Sarah is trying to figure out why it's or how it's happening, and then Dr. Logan tries to figure out how it's happening with the zombies, trying to from a biological view.
Also, in his own insanity, he was trying to domesticate them, which in the original long multi-million-dollar budget film, Captain Rhodes was more like a Dr. No figure, and there were people who had armies of good zombies, and there were people who had armies of bad zombies, and there were all these wonderful scenes in the jungle and rounding up the zombies a la Planet of the Apes. But George couldn't guarantee a PG rating, and so they actually made the film stronger than anybody thought it would be, because big scale, helicopters flying and dropping nets on zombies and fortresses and mass baptisms of zombies and things like that. So he had to cut the budget way back, and that's how we ended up underground. The conflict between the military point of view going head-to-head with the scientific point of view, going head-to-head with the Haitian spirituality point of view, going to Antoine de Leo's character, a Hispanic point of view, because actually Mexico is the only country that celebrates a day called Day of the Dead. So you had all these different points of view trapped in a very small claustrophobic situation, and it just was a
You know, like if you fast forward to the newer horror films, like zombie films, you see the characters are always dramatic, freaking out about this and this and this. But this film, these characters are actually, on the outside, are actually pretty calm. They're like, okay, we're stuck here. How can we make the best of it until we can either get rescued or find a way out?
Right.
Rather than just, you know, yelling at each other constantly and attempting to kill each other, this one tries to make their own home in this cave. Right. And try to live with each other as best as possible, even though they can't stand each other for a lot of the time, because the military are trying to get answers, like Captain Rhodes. He wants answers. He wants it now.
Yeah.
And you got the scientists. Yeah. They're trying to figure it out. They have no idea, but yet they have no equipment to really do this. And Dr. Logan's pretty much the only one that has a significant answer at this point.
Yeah, well, except Logan was a Mad Hatter. You just knew it the moment he walked in the door in the mess hall scene with his coat covered in blood and, asking, is there food? Is there food? You know, and that's when Rhodes just blows the stack and says, I'm running this monkey farm, not Frankenstein, and I want to know what the fuck doing with my time, you know. Yeah. Actually, George has said many times that it's his favorite part of the trilogy, which makes me pretty happy.
And this film in particular is the fact, I think it's the closest, at this time, would be the closest as far as an explanation or insight of an actual zombie apocalypse, because you can see each aspect, like from the military and, like you said, and the scientist's point of view, and it's like they're trying to work it out, and it's like this is as close as I've seen. Other than World War Z, is the only other one that I know that has some kind of an explanation of some kind.
Right. Hopefully, we're not going to reach a saturation point of zombies. I made a joke at the Pittsburgh convention. I said, has anybody seen IHOP Zombies, where you stop in for a stack of pancakes, or Sorority Zombie, I Ate a Thigh, or Home Depot Zombies, Don't Put the Nail Gun to Your Head. I saw this really terrible movie, I thought, called Zombie Detention. you should look at it if you have.
I'm totally going to.
You can use your imagination. High school kids stuck in detention, and some of them are zombies. It's just, on the other hand, it's a very brilliant film called Mimesis, which is a virtual reality game that is based on the original Night of the Living Dead. It's called Mimesis, and it's a wonderful film. It's a wonderful film. George is now, I think he's in his 5th edition of his comic book, Vampire Empire, or Empire of Vampires. I got a couple of copies when I was in Pittsburgh. I just haven't had a chance to read them, but maybe that'll be the basis for his long-awaited next film.
No, that'd be cool.
Yeah, it would be. It would be comic book style. George always signs on his autograph. He always says, "Stay scared." It's becoming harder and harder to stay scared at a movie because the world political situation is so fucking scary.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, you just ask yourself, or my fuck fans out there, ask yourself, when was the last time that you were really scared, either at a movie or reading a book or something that really made your spine tingle? In the 50s, it was very easy with the science. You look at the science fiction films, the 50s, the original The Day the Earth Stood Still, or going back to the 40s, Howard Hawks's The Thing, Creature from Another Planet. And then, of course, you go to all of the Universal films that were fucking scary.
Yeah,
but it's a sign of the time as we become so sophisticated and so jaded to gore. I mean, what are they going to make, Saw 13 or Halloween 52, or we've just become jaded to it, and so much of it is now computer graphic that hands-on thing that Savini and Greg Nicotero people like that, a real fleshy craftsmanship. I mean, look at my death scene in Day of the Dead. There was no CG there, no special animation, no doctoring. That was it. That's the effect. They shot the effect, and that's the effect. It wasn't enhanced. It wasn't painted over or whatever.
You didn't stick a double in there. You had to make it look like you.
I was stuck in a fucking hole in the floor for 4.5 hours. Yeah, I was there.
Smelling pig guts all day. Well, playing as Captain Rhodes, did the cave actually influence you in some way of your character?
Well, it affected us. It affected all of us in so many ways. All of us. First of all, we all got deathly ill with bronchial infections because the dust down there was just extremely bad. I mean, I'll give you a gross example. I mean, after 12 hours, you go up to your room and wash your makeup off and blow your nose, and all this black shit would come out of your nose. The other thing is because it wasn't a traditional movie set where you go back to your trailer when you weren't working between shots. There was nowhere to go. We had nowhere to go. We had little room, and we shot the shit when we weren't working. So in many ways, it made us as an ensemble. It made us tighter, and we got to kind of read each other's sensibility and the working conditions. I mean, except for those lucky few that got to go to Florida, I wasn't one of them. But for 8 weeks in the mine, we never saw sunlight. It was winter. We'd get up in the morning, it would be dark, and we'd finish 6, 7 o'clock at night, and it would be dark. We'd go back to the hotel, and in most movies where the environment is kind of artistic creation, we were all stuck. The cast, the crew, the caterers, the gun wranglers, makeup people, gophers, we were all stuck in this really horrible place. All right, you're stalling me now. I'm loading my gun. Come on. Let me get the shot. Saving it for you.
But was there ever any discussion as far as the deaths of the characters? Was there ever any discussion in between you guys who should die and how should they die?
Oh, no. I mean, how Derek Clark Steele, me, of course, Rhodes, wonderful actor who's passed away, Ralph Guerrero, who was Rickles, and another wonderful actor, Richard Liberty, who was Logan. How we died was completely scripted, except for my death scene was the last day of shooting because each actor had a day to die because each one of those death scenes were fairly complicated special effects setup. My turn to die because it was scripted that I would be cut, torn in half. That was definitely scripted. And I said to George, listen, George, look, Captain Rhodes is not going to go down without having something to say about it. And he said, well, Joe, you're torn in half. Your esophagus is probably attached to your legs that are being dragged down the hallway. So, well, I mean, what? And I said, well, there's something I think he would say. He said, all right, well, he's being generous. He said, all right, just run it by me. And there were other people in the room, and I was a little embarrassed. I didn't want to say it out loud, so I said, can I whisper it in your ear? And the big, tall guy leans down and gives me his ear, and I went, choke on him. And he looked at me, and he said, all right. He said, you got it. I like it. I love it. Just make sure you get it right, because we're going to have 3 cameras rolling, and we only got one take on this hit. This is the martini shot of the film. Did we discuss amongst ourselves how? I know that Gary Steele made the choice to make the sign of the cross with his gun. That was his choice. But pretty much the how of the deaths were all scripted by George.
You know that there's a lot of gore in this one compared to Dawn of the Dead. Was that kind of a risk in some factors? Because usually when film has this much gore, it's usually having to go through an assload of process just to get that R rating or however they go for. Because
there was there was day one. That's why the budget was cut down to I believe $4 million because George never considered it getting rated. It wasn't going to happen, so it was like full speed ahead. You just go for fucking broke with it, and I think that's another thing that makes it because the gore, as in so many movies today, gore was relevant to the situation and relevant to the character's conflict, as opposed to the gore being gratuitous. Let's put 4 girls in a bikini in a cabin by a lake and see how many different ways we can blow their tits off.
Yeah. Especially like in the newer horror films, including the zombie films. I think more gore is a bore because that's all it is. There's no storyline. It's just straight up.
Exactly. That's, there are, as I said, this film I mentioned, Mimesis, actually has probably no gore. I saw this film with Mel Gibson. I think it was called Signs. It was about the crop.
Yeah, it's an alien film. It's a crop.
Yeah. And then there was a film about the guy who had a sense that doomsday was coming. And he built this bunker in his backyard. I'm terrible with names. I'm sure your listeners will know what I'm talking about. And then there was the other one with Matt Damon, where something in the wind was killing people. And as you said, as you pointed out, the gore we see today is gratuitous because it's tied into a very tight, intelligent, articulate storyline.
You don't have to have a ton of gore just to make a successful horror film.
No, but I mean, two examples. One is the original Frankenstein, which based upon Mary Shelley's book, which was called Frankenstein or Prometheus Unbound. A highly literate novel, and that is what allowed Karloff and James White to take off with the film. Or if you look at Spencer Tracy's portrayal, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, again based on Robert Louis Stevenson's novel, intelligent, exciting storyline with great characters. It's very hard to do. It's amazing when you think of how prolific George has been with all of his films. Including Monkey Shines and including Night Riders. He always had a very, very strong story with a very strong outlook on the world. And that's the sign of a great filmmaker.
Even limited of characterization, as far as how they act, how they react. It's not overdone. It's not underdone. It's right there in the moment.
Right. Yeah. Right. And because he creates a series of wonderful, compelling moments, and I just hope he continues to do it.
Yeah. Overall, on the story itself, how'd you react to the final product of this? Were you pretty satisfied of how everything went, even including the ending?
Well, unfortunately, when the film released in the theaters, when it was released, I think it was released around Easter time. I can't remember exactly when it was released, but the critics, especially Siskel and Ebert, hated the movie because everybody wanted another shopping mall. They couldn't get beyond the fact that it did take place in like a skyscraper, which actually in Land of the Dead it kind of did. The original Dawn of the Dead, all the critics, were just so amazed at George's social commentary by making it take place in a shopping mall. They were stuck with a cave, and they poo-pooed it. We originally got, not in terms of the genre, I'm talking about, as I said, Siskel and Ebert, people like that, but actually 10 years later, they're both dead now, but one of them re-looked the film and rewrote his review and gave it a glowing review. So we weren't originally notorious people coming out. It was, we made the film, and the critics didn't like it. And it took a good number of years for people to catch up to the film. And now, I do a lot of conventions, and people, they bring their kids. The kids are dressed like zombies, and they've seen the movie, and it's like they're handing the genre fans are handing the mantle over to their children. So you have a whole new generation of genre fans that are coming up. Because at that time, even though the success that Dawn of the Dead had, fervor and the intelligence and the largeness of the genre fan population was not that big at the time. There were very, very few conventions. It took a while. Next year's the 30th anniversary of the movie. That's kind of a scary thought.
Yeah, for something that's low budget and to the point where kind of like a make or break moment. This is another major film by George Romero. Having to get it out there is like possibly a huge risk for everyone as far as the acting perspective goes. Even kids could root to this film. Why? Because Miguel ends up being a hero.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then again, I go back to different point of views. And you remember when he opens up the elevator for the missile base, he takes his crucifix medallion and he makes the sign of the cross. And because of his action, that Rhodes and the bad guys got eliminated, and the good guys got to take off in the helicopter.
You see him at the beginning as, well, you could tell when he first started to be in the military, he wanted to be a strong person. But as you see something like this, that nobody on the face of the earth, if you're still on the earth, he'd even handle this type of situation. And you can tell he's slowly but surely just breaking down. Rhodes and his men aren't really helping too well. The chances are they don't really see him as an actual military figure of any kind. As you see, when he's trying to handle the zombie in the one scene, he lets go of the pole and almost gets his Wriggles killed.
Well, it also shows the racism of Rhodes and company, because we refer to Tim's character as a spick, and then when I gave Gary the order to punch out John, I say teach this jungle bunny a lesson. It's a definite anti-military sentiment running through that movie, which played right up my alley, because I was an old hippie and I had marched against the Vietnam War, so I basically really did not have much use for the military. So it was fairly easy for me to portray them in a kind of horrific light.
And not only that, there are more zombies in this film than Dawn of the Dead combined.
Right, absolutely.
And the fact all these zombies came from different regions, and not just pussy looking, disgusting, like goblin, ghoul looking type characters like all you see in zombie films that look pretty disgusting, like they came from the sewer. These are zombies that were infected. You can tell they were infected. You can tell that they were either hurt. Like one, for example, there's a zombie in there, a military zombie. He has his arms up like something fell on him, but he got bit, and then the zombie left, and then he ended up being a zombie, and he's stuck in that position as he walks into the bunker.
Right. And then there's that famous scene where Bub salutes Captain Rhodes, and Logan says, "Come on, he saluted you. I bet he was a soldier at one time." And it was salute him back, and I say, "You want me to salute that walking pile of pus? Salute my ass." And that's another line that I came up with when he was hunting me down in the hallway, and you can actually see it. I'm crawling, and I hit my head against the wall, and it really hurt like a motherfucker. In fact, I almost busted the shot, but I turned around and I said, "You puss fuck," and when the scene was cut and they were checking to make sure everything was okay, and we could move on to the next scene, the sound guy says, wait a minute, and he says to George, he goes, did he say Pasfak? And George says, yeah, and I like it. Keep it. So, things happen.
It is a possibility that these zombies could be trained. How long? Who knows? We already saw how difficult it can be. Even though Dr. Logan was a crazy man, he had some sense in there. He knew sort of what he was doing, but he was also a butcher too. He used the body parts of already dead military.
That's what really pushed Rhodes over the edge. But you see it in Land of the Dead as well. The zombies had the ability to go across the river.
Yeah.
And then the moment where one of the zombies figures out how to use a chainsaw, and you kind of see a little bit of the possibility that there could be some signs of intelligent life found somewhere, in this Holocaust of madness.
Each one has a phase. Night of the Living Dead, the original, George Romero, there's an outbreak. That's the first step. And then there's Dawn of the Dead, where zombies are just now starting to go other regions. As you can, if you were to combine Night of the Living Dead to this, no one still doesn't know what's going on, and that's when the cool part is the real military actually had a real role in this film as well.
Right.
And then Day of the Dead, it moves to a whole side of the world, bigger and bigger as far as hordes go. And then you look at Land of the Dead, they're starting to get more intelligence, and people. It seems like people is basically giving up on trying to just fight them. They just build a city and just live and try to do the very best they can, scavenge this, and then just fight off whatever zombies comes toward the city. But the zombies are actually getting smarter, and they don't realize that.
And the other important political point in Land of the Dead, it was only the rich people survived. Only the rich people were able to afford to live in that timeshare community, as it were,
Yeah.
And have the best of food, the best of drink, the best of everything that could be. Dennis Hopper's minions could go out, collect, and bring back, and then you have the zombie fight where I see Argento was caught in the ring, and it really kind of almost like the fall of the Roman Empire dying in its own decadence.
Yeah, and then you go to Dire of the Dead. This is the stage where they're trying to figure out what do they like to eat. What do they really like to eat other than just brains? A little bit in Night of the Living Dead, like you'll see a zombie try to eat a moth or something, and you see Tom Savini's vision of Night of the Living Dead, the remake. You see a zombie eating a mouse head.
Right. There's all the symbols point some sort of, and that comes out too in 28 Days Later.
Yeah. Also a different one.
I think there were two of them. 28 Days Later, and then I forget what the other one was called.
20 weeks later.
This is the same kind of thing of stockpiling, and then George liked to say that fast zombies suck. And then the zombies have the ability to run, and then Shaun of the Dead, which was a brilliant satirical look at the zombie movie.
I thought it was great.
Simon Pegg and I forget his partner's name.
Yeah, Simon Pegg and Nick Frost was in Shaun of the Dead.
Right. I mean, that you compare that to this film I mentioned, Zombie Detention. There's absolutely no comparison, because Shaun of the Dead was a very well shot. They actually pay homage to that scene in it. They made a brilliant film from a semi. And pretty much comedic, the guy coming up to get his newspaper and not noticing that there's zombies walking all over the neighborhood,
Or even the scene where they said that.
Where the guy gets shot, look through the hole in his body. Things like that. Nice little moments like that.
Or the Z word, the zombie word. He tells him not to, don't say the Z word. And he goes, why not? Because it sounds ridiculous.
Which is actually funny, too, because the original title for Night of the Living Dead was The Flesh Eaters, and I don't even think they used the word zombie to Night of the Living Dead, which is how it went into eminent domain, because there was some legal screw up because they had registered the film as Flesh Eaters, and after so many years, there was no Flesh Eater film. It was Night of the Living Dead, and so it went into public domain, which George was on NPR radio about 3-4 weeks ago, and actually most of the interview was about the comic books, and he talked about how it went into the public domain, and because I have a picture coming out soon, hopefully, if Simon West Productions, the people that did Black Hawk Down, called Night of the Living Dead Origins, which is the same story, only it's set in present time in New York City. But anybody and their grandmother can make Night of the Living Dead because it's in the public domain. George doesn't see it that. We haven't seen a dime in residuals from Day of the Dead. It has nothing to do with George. It has a lot to do with the producers who were just out to screw everybody, which is one reason why there was a remake, so that they could somehow get something back for what they. I mean, when a film ends up in the Museum of Modern Art, which Night of the Living Dead did 2 years ago, it's a permanent fixture in the archives of the Museum of Modern Art. That's that's a testimony to a great film and a great filmmaker.
Old school horror actually has some real thrills, real scares, and actually had some meaning because they remember it. Nowadays, it looks like a little bit too cartoony. It's like, especially when it comes to zombie films, a lot of the newer zombie films are just way too cartoony. They just kill them for the sake of killing them because they're there.
Right. Well, Hollywood Hollywood has its great points and Hollywood has its bad points. They'll remake anything because there is. Nobody wants to take a risk with with new ideas. I mean, a perfect example of that is the success the Blair Witch Project had. Somebody took a shot at a new idea, as opposed to Hollywood is about formula. If the formula works once, the formula is going to work again. But then you ask yourself, how many times can you see a guy in a fucking hockey mask stabbing people, or how many? The last Halloween movie, as compared to the first Halloween movie, which was a great movie, and so, it was a great movie, we'll do it this way. Instead of it happening on Monday, it'll happen on a Tuesday. Instead of it being in the country, we'll make it in the city. And then again, you go back to great writing, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and then you look at the movie Dracula, and you see a great story, an original story, a great movie, or the silent film Nosferatu. There's actually a great, wonderful film again out there. John Malkovich plays Murnau, Nosferatu. Willem Dafoe plays the Nosferatu figure, and I can't. I'm terrible, but I'm sure you're a fan. And if you're not, smarten the fuck up, because I know where you live now. I know where all of you live now, and I can come and find you at any time I want. So you should be looking over your shoulder at all times.
Is there anything else you want to add as coming toward the Day of the Dead? Is there any other words you'd like to share with us before we go?
Yeah, actually there is. Shakespeare said that we are such stuff as dreams are made of. And 30 years ago, 4 or 5 other actors were the stuff of George's dream. It was George's dream, and we became the stuff that his dream was made of. We were performing for a camera, and the only audience when we were performing was the crew. So then when it was released and the public embraced it, the genre fans in particular embraced it, they then became part of George's dream. We are such stuff as dreams are made of. And I say this a lot, and I will end on this note, because genre fans are the best fans in the world, because they're not looky-loos. They come up to your table, they ask, some of them look a little weird with 14 or 15 rings in their nose and tattoos galore, but they ask and tell the intelligent questions. They're not just there to get an autograph and a picture. They want answers to their questions, and they know the material. It's not like, oh, I got a picture of Tom Cruise. Ooh, ooh, ooh. I want to know this. I want to know, well, what was that moment like? What was happening there? Why do you think that happened? And without the genre fans, me personally, I would just be stuck on a piece of celluloid. But now, over the last 30 years, I have this extended family, and without the genre fans, we really don't exist. We exist in a film canister, or we exist in a video cassette or a CD, but it's that human contact provoked by George and embraced by the fans lovingly and intelligently that makes this whole ride worth taking. And as I said, you have parents bring their kids, and they're passing the torch, as Kennedy said, to a new generation of genre fans. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So I hope you folk behind the screen of Raid will stay scared and will be demanding of people who present their work to you and ask tough questions, and most of all, have fun. Stay scared.
It's time for the movie rate, and tonight we go behind the screams with John Harrison, film composer from Day of the Dead film. Hello.
How you doing, Mike?
What's going on?
Just hanging out in sunny, hot Southern California at the moment.
Enjoying the barbecues recently?
No, actually, I've been working. I've been busy. Well, that's not entirely true. I've made a little time to hang out with a couple of people and have a few dogs and burgers.
Tell us how'd you get approached to this film per se?
Well, I knew George from a long time, and we had done different projects together, including the movie before this called Creepshow. And there was a period of time when George was trying to get Day of the Dead up, and it was going through different incarnations. He had a much larger, more expensive, more elaborate script that he was trying to get off the ground at one point. When we couldn't raise the money to do that particular script, he revised it into a more manageable production, which is what ended up on the screen, and in fact has become kind of a classic now. So in the end, I guess you'd say it kind of all worked out well. So I was I'd come back out to Los Angeles after Creepshow and was directing episodes of his Tales from the Dark Side TV show and writing them and doing the music for them. They were, you had to be a sort of a full-service enterprise for those. And they were a lot of fun, and at the time the money came through, he said, come on back, let's do this. And so my wife and I flew back. She was the production coordinator, and I was the AD, and worked with George. We did the shoot, and then I segued into the music composition.
When composing, did you have full control as far as the creative process goes, or did George also have a hand in this?
Oh, well, George always had a hand in it. I mean, the thing about George is, first of all, he's a very gifted film editor, and as a result, even though he's not a musician, he has an incredible musical sense. I was always astonished at how he had, first of all, he had a wonderful collection of film scores, so he knew movie music. But he also was able to create scores out of library cues and what we call needle drops, because he never had the money for original scores in his early films, and so he would put together scores out of pre-existing cues. And because he was such a fabulous editor, he could put together 2 or 3 cues and make them sound like something entirely new. So he always had a great musical sense and a real knowledge of what he wanted for his films. And when Creepshow came along, and I did that for him, he and I collaborated constantly on what that was going to sound like. That translated into our working relationship on Day of the Dead. The great thing about working with George is that he wanted me to be around all the time in post-production. And if you know the business very well, that's really kind of a luxury for a composer. Most times, composers and directors have precious little time together. The composer's given a cut of the film, he writes by himself, maybe he shows temp cues to the director, maybe sends over a couple of pieces of music just to get approvals. But the next time the director sees it often is on the scoring stage. In this case, I was able to be back in the Berg for the entire post-production period. And so I'd be downstairs in a little cubbyhole that we set up where I brought all my gear. And Pat Buba and George, Pat Buba the editor, and George would be upstairs. They'd be working on cuts. They'd come downstairs and they'd drop like VHSs through the mail slot, and I would get them and load them up, and I would write to them, and then I was able to bring cues upstairs and say temp cues and say, what do you think of this? And George would say, yeah, man, a little of this or a little more of that, and I'd go back down, revise it. So by the time I got to the recording studio to do the score for the soundstage, it was almost completely written, and we'd already seen it against the movie, so there were no surprise. It was a fabulous way to work. And so he was involved deeply all the way through.
Now, was this the same equipment you used as you did in Creepshow, or was this a whole new setup?
I had more gear for Day. The technology moves so fast, and it was moving so fast back then, that by the time we got to Day, which was, I think, about 4 years later, 5 years later than Creepshow, there were all kinds of new things that I could play with. Essentially, it was the same gear. It was a couple of music processors, and I brought in a fabulous guitarist named Grant Geisman to play with me on Day. We had a wonderful percussionist. I played the bass. So it was a little bit more elaborate in some ways than the Creepshow score, and obviously a completely different style and sound. Essentially the same kind of thing. We didn't have the budgets back then to hire orchestras or even small ensembles to do the score. I had to do everything.
The score itself is different compared to other horror films. This one's a distinctive sound. What were you aiming for as far as the direction goes, the creative direction?
Well, we had talked about this a lot, and one of the things that we definitely wanted to do that I had pitched to George was, why don't we be a little counterintuitive about this? And instead of writing the normal kind of creepy, full of shocks and stings horror score, why don't we go against the grain a little bit? The movie, as you know, is very grim. The world it creates is very dark, in many ways hopeless. And so I thought, well, that could be kind of an unrelenting emotional drag for 2 hours. Maybe we can lighten it up. We can use the music to find those moments of humor that George always has in his movies. We could give it a broader texture. It's a very claustrophobic movie. It's all down in the caves and just occasionally outside. And I thought the music could really go against the grain a little bit and help that out. When George had written the original version, the bigger script, it was set in southern Florida and the Keys, and it really had a very Caribbean feel to it. So I went with that as kind of a theme and started fooling around with motifs that were in that kind of vein. And I put together a small demo of a couple of themes that I was working on, and George really loved them. Well, then when the new script came in and he had to abandon that whole idea, we kept the ideas that I had written for the music. Those were the ones that ended up in the film. It was a little controversial at the time. There were a lot of people who didn't like that score at the beginning because they thought, well, it's not horror enough. It's not scary. It's not creepy.
Yeah, there's no boom or bah.
Yeah, it's not the real weird, creepy strings that make chills go up your spine. The big shock stings that come out and whenever anything happens. It was much more lyrical, but over time, it's actually become very popular, and people really dig it. And last year they put out a new collector's edition CD and LP. It's, I guess, stood up over time.
And then sometimes you'll hear just a regular band playing throughout, a gore scene, someone hacking someone to death or something like that.
Yeah.
But for this type of piece of music, this actually stands out. It's something different. It's not too poppy. It actually fits very well with each scene as you watch the film. It pulls you in there. Even toward the end, you hear you can hear the zombies coming in.
Yeah, well, George and I told you George had this unbelievable collection of soundtracks. I mean, I have a bunch, but man, he has wall-to-wall great scores, and not just horror scores. I mean, we're talking the greats of, I would say younger guys like Jerry Goldsmith, but, going back to Bernard Herrmann and Korngold and Franz Waxman and all those guys, their kinds of music, the way they fit the film, the way they supported the emotional moments in the movies, were things that George and I really dug. The fact that we were doing a horror movie didn't mean that we were going to abandon that. We wanted this music to have the same quality as those kinds of scores that we love. That's why it works the way it does, I think.
Yeah, a little bit influential from each scene as you hear the music. Every piece puts together.
Yeah, there are themes, obviously repetitive motifs that we restate them different ways. They have different orchestrations so that given the different scene, they make sense. I hope it's kind of a unified whole.
Yeah, as far as the promotion goes, how did that fare out with you? Because this was back in 1985, mind you.
Well, when you mean promotion, you mean in terms of getting a soundtrack out and everything?
Yes.
Well, at the time, Tom Causey, who owns Saturn Records, came to me, and he's a Pittsburgh boy, and he wanted to put the release out, and we did. I honestly don't know how well it did. With these small... The movie, of course, did not do great when it first came out, so by extension, the soundtrack didn't either. But over the years, it's continued to play. I hear it on the radio and on channels that are devoted to genre movies, and then La La Land has put it out twice now, and the guys down at Waxwork in New Orleans have put out the first LP version of it. It never got the kind of, I guess you'd say, studio system soundtrack album promotion.
Or at least recognition for it. I mean, it's there, but they didn't exactly took the bait, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And so, there weren't big trade ads. It's hung around, so I ain't complaining.
But yeah, it's a little bit hypocritical because back then they'll tear down horror films or even other genre films that were really, really good. But until you fast forward now, it's like they became cult classics all of a sudden.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there was the occasional Tubular Bells that would come out, or Goldsmith score for Dick Donner's movie about Damien. What was that called? I forget. And there were the occasional big-time scores that would be associated with horror movies, The Exorcist, or that kind of thing. But the genre movies, you're right. They were kind of second-class citizens, and I think the scores were too.
And in a way, the actual score, in some aspects, it's almost like it's too underrated to really appreciate it because it's there, you hear it, but the only thing they really want is like, for example, Michael Jackson Thriller.
Yeah.
Something like that, and of the new era. And I know I said this before.
Well, that's it, but there have been so many really good composers working in the genre. I mean, Joe LaDuca working with Sam Raimi, and Chris Young working with so many greats, including George once. And, there are a lot of first-rate musicians that have played in this territory. Recently, there's been more respect given the genre. I mean, we are now living in the world of fantasy and horror on television and in movies, quite a bit different. I mean, I'm talking, we're all talking big-time stuff now. So I think the pendulum has swung a little bit, are respecting it a little bit more than they did back then.
Yeah, slowly but surely. But when it comes to this film, were you actually a little hesitant since it didn't get great reviews at the time? And did you feel this kind of hurt your career a little bit, even though it has George Romero's name on it, though?
No, not really, Mike. Because you see, here's the thing: I didn't set out to create a career as a film composer. I kind of almost fell into it by accident, and that was because of working with George. Back in the day when we were in the Berg and we were doing things, it was really independent filmmaking. I mean, we put together crews of people, and basically the only thing that we had in terms of real movie-making skills was our enthusiasm. We just, people learned by doing. And so I happened to be the guy with a piano. So when it came to, well, we're going to need some music for this, who do we call? Well, Harrison's got a piano. So that's how I kind of fell into it. I was very lucky that break enabled me to work in that field for a while. I did George's scores. I did the scores for Tales from the Dark Side television series for some of them, music for my own film like Tales from the Dark Side, a Paramount movie. It allowed me to get into a career that I really had never anticipated. So I don't feel that the lack of immediate success of Day of the Dead hurt me at all. I really wasn't out here in Hollywood trying to get an agent and trying to get onto big film or anything like that. I was very happy to play in this little sandbox with people I knew because I was also developing my writing and directing career at the same time. I look back on that time very fondly, and I'm thrilled when people like Waxwork and La La Land come along and say, we want to re-release this, and then we have screenings and the fans show up and everything. I mean, it's terrific. No, I don't think it hurt me at all.
Do you think a little bit they should go back to the old ways when making scores or anything film related into this generation? Because it seems when you look back then, at that time, yeah, it was primitive. It was still a new age at that time as far as technology goes. Trying to get it out there, it was very difficult at the time. Now it's kind of a lot more easier, a little bit more at ease at the time when it comes to technology. But as far as popularity goes, not as great. It's just all about the big bucks rather than the actual quality of the film and the quality of the soundtrack.
Well, it's kind of a complicated issue you're raising there. I think since technology has made it so much easier in many ways to create elaborate scores, there's a tendency, I think, not to take it maybe as seriously. Obviously, if you're dealing with the big movies, there's a great deal of money and resources thrown at that. But what really kind of is lacking that I see right now is sort of the collaboration between the filmmaker and the composer. You know, I've always felt that music is as much a story element as the cinematography or the dialogue. And if it's done properly, it can convey so many things that the filmmaker is trying to say with the movie in terms of emotional context, even plot devices and things like that. My experience with George taught me that the collaboration between the director or the filmmaker and the composer could really be productive. It could really be special. And there have been other examples of this throughout history. I mean, the obvious ones are Spielberg and Williams, or Hitchcock and Bernard Herrmann, you know, those kinds of relationships. But look at the scores that come out of those things. The reason is the composer and the filmmaker are collaborating on the story. And the composer is basically delivering to the filmmaker a vision musically of what the movie is about. A lot of times what happens now is it's an afterthought, and that's the problem.
Yeah, there's like no communications. A lot of times it would be one specific person, like let's say for example a director and or writer that just wants to do it their own way, their own direction, and kind of force it on the other person. Oh, okay, fine, because of time restraints and money restraints, and then just end up having a bad product in the end.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of directors I've encountered don't have a musical background. They don't have a lot of intuitive feeling about what should be done. Many of them would say, well, just play it for me. I'll know it when I like it. But it's like anything. If you don't know about it, you can educate yourself about it. And rather than kind of consider it after the fact or just some kind of undertone, you wouldn't not engage your cinematographer in shooting it. You should engage your composer in the same way, I think.
Well, go ahead and plug in anything that you like, any projects you're involved in, or any more advice you'd like to give.
Well, I mean, anybody that's interested in doing the compositions, doing movie music, I mean, I'm almost kind of jealous because, as I said, the technology enables people now to do so much more elaborate things than I was able to do, unless you had money. I think if anybody is interested in doing it, then I would encourage them just to align themselves with filmmakers, get to know filmmakers, spend time with them, and work with them that way. You know, there's so many marvelous opportunities now for all kinds of projects to be made, and I would, not turn down any work. Just do anything that comes along, because every one of those experiences will be a learning experience.
Well, there you go. And this is the Day of the Dead special, Behind the Screams with composer John Harrison.